We're going to do a little forecasting of 2025 on Locked On Nuggets. What Nuggets will have their best year ever next season? And who might slide back a little bit? We'll talk about that. Plus, the West seems like a death gauntlet. We'll talk about exactly how tough it's going to be. All that and more on World's Finest here on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day and being with us. We do appreciate you guys being in every day or hanging out with us Monday through Friday. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Adam Mares of DNVR. This is World's Finest with you on a Monday. Glad to have you guys with us. Adam, happy Father's Day to you, my man.
Happy Father's Day to you, Matt.
Yeah, two old dads sitting around talking hoops here on a Monday. Recording this on Sunday night. If you're in the chat, let us know. We're going to talk about these things today. We're going to talk about what Nuggets will be better than ever next season. What Nuggets are going to be maybe a little bit worse next season, who might struggle next season. Plus, in the last segment, we'll talk about how tough the West will be. In the comments real quick, let me know the number one player you think will be better than ever next season. Let me know in the comments. So, Adam, we'll start there. Next season, Nuggets looking to return to Western Conference title contention after a disappointing end to the 2024 season. We have a lot of questions. We're not sure what the roster is going to look like in its entirety. We know most of the roster, I think. But KCP is obviously a big question mark. I'll just start right here. Who do you think is going to be better than ever next season?
So I actually think the number one guy on my list, and better than ever, is doing some work. I really just looked at this as who's going to be better, who's going to be worse. The player who I think will most be better is Christian Braun. And I think I'm operating under the assumption that KCP will be gone. If he is not gone, that changes. Then I think he'll have more or less the same year that he had this year, maybe, marginal increase in what he's capable of. But assuming that he starts next year in place of KCP, you just say you take away minutes not with Jokic and make them minutes with Jokic, you're going to have a better season. One, if you look at the difference in minutes between KCP and Christian Braun, it's about 800 minutes. So automatically you're talking about more minutes per game, and those being with Jokic plus natural growth of being a third-year player. I think he's the player you most expect to be better than he was this year.
So I'm not sure I agree. And the reason I think is because I have I'm not as much of a Christian hater as maybe it seems like. I just think that it's asking, I just don't think he's ready for that role, and the reason I don't think he's ready for that role is because he did struggle for most of the season in terms of offensive stuff. And I worry about his ability. I mean, some of this is hard for me because the eye test versus the numbers is really tough here, where when I watch Christian, I'm like, where is he going? Like, where is he dribbling to? What was that drive? What was that play? What was that shot? And then you look at the overall numbers, and whenever he's in those staggered units with Nikola, and they're better oftentimes than the starter minutes. Like Christian was part of
number one. It's the number one two-man pairing with Jokic is Christian Braun.
Yeah. And so do we think that that's because of Christian?
Well, no.
Well, I mean, I think, I guess here's a better way to put that though, right? It's not because of Christian, but it's not because of Christian. Like Christian's not preventing them from that. That's a better kind of way to put it, right? Is like they're able to have these incredible net ratings in the minutes that he's on the floor, beat their opponents by more. Like if you don't want to use net rating, they beat their opponents by more with Jokic when Christian's with him than any other combo. It can't say that Christian's holding them back. So if Christian refines some of those other things that I've been worried about, just with more reps, more repetition, and some summer work, then by all means, he can have, the best year of anybody in terms of relative growth.
There's nobody that's played with Jokic for a season, heavy minutes, that hasn't had some kind of two-man game with him, right? Like Aaron Gordon, they have their thing, KCP, little curl action, this or that, Michael Porter. Christian doesn't have one right now with Yoke. I think he reads the court well. He knows where to be. He's a very smart player. He's like the starters this year in terms of just knowing how the rhythm of the game work, how to stay out of the way, and those different things. But he doesn't have a two-man game, and I just think you give him 2,000 minutes next year with Jokic, and he'll have those things. I actually think he'll have a couple of them. They're not going to be super dynamic. He's not going to be doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but I do think you'll see recurring plays where it's like, oh, that's the play he always slips on and gets a wide open layup for. Or, oh, that's the cut he always makes in that moment. Yoke throws it blindly. So I think he'll be good. I think he'll shoot the ball well. And more than anything, I just think he's a player who's like doesn't do crazy stuff. And I don't think he's going to do crazy stuff next year, especially if he plays more with Yoke.
It's interesting that you think that, because I find so many of his drives to be out of control. And that's a big reason why I have some doubts about him, is because it does seem oftentimes like he drives without a clear plan of what he wants to do and has to kind of improvise at the moment of attack.
With Jokic?
I guess not. I guess that's a good point.
And that's just the thing. I honestly don't think I think Christian knows he's not good at that.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that. I don't think Christian... I think I would agree. Christian is a very self-aware player. My guy will be Peyton Watson, and I don't want to necessarily pit those two against each other, right? Because I think they can both grow in their own pathways. Peyton showed me so much in terms of having an overall shake to his game, that he can break down guys off the dribble, that he can get to the rim, that he can pass, that he can run a little bit of actions, and that he does have a little bit of a capability to shoot. So, like, I genuinely think that Peyton Watson can develop into a 3-level scorer, which doesn't mean that he's like a 3-level high scorer, right? I'm not saying that he's going to be like a superstar. That's like the very edge of his projection. And that's, that the guys that are so into him, and then this isn't talking about Booth, I'm talking about like Draftniks and et cetera. They think that he's got that kind of potential, but I'm just more talking about being able to be a guy that maybe that second unit doesn't look so bad, because it's like, hey, Christian, like Peyton Watson was able to actually take the ball and just like create a little bit on his own. So there was more creation in that second unit, and that really helped. And for me, I am genuinely not sure what happened to Peyton Watson this season. Like, I don't understand the team's trajectory with him, where it was like he was so much better than Christian for 4 months and had so many huge games. And then All-Star happened. And then it was like they've switched bodies, where it was just like Christian was in the rotation and playing really well and knocking down threes and in the playoff rotation. And it was like, boy, don't know about Peyton. And I don't know what I missed in terms of what happened with Watson's trajectory, because he was trending so high up, I thought, for the first 4 months of the season.
I think it was more about Christian, to be honest. I think it was more Christian not being good early on. And I think the reason was because they were asking him to, step outside of what he was comfortable with. And when you talk about a lot of these drives, I think a lot of it was that, his explore the game phase of year 2. The thing about Peyton, though, I think, first of all, more minutes, more trust, and more opportunity to play with starters will be huge for him. And if that happens, I agree that I think he could be number 1 very easily, because I still believe that he has a tremendous upside. But the second part of this for Peyton, for me, is what does Michael Malone want of him? Because obviously when you're with Yoke, there's no concern. So don't step outside the lines, be smart, be efficient, do what you do. He'll be good in those minutes when he gets them. But unlike Christian, I think Peyton will still play a lot of his minutes without Jokic. And the question is he a corner guy? Go to the corners and stand there. Let whoever it is you bring in at point guard to do their thing, a la Reggie Jackson this year, and you're out of the way. Or is there, because there's a lot of trust in giving Peyton Watson the ball, setting up plays in the playbook that are like, hey, this is where we want you running pick and roll. We want you doing this. This year, they didn't do that really at all. And if you're saying next year they're going to do that, I think it'll mirror. I think the first 7-8 weeks will probably be very hot and cold. He'll have nights where he looks great and he'll have nights that he's terrible. Will Michael Malone commit to that for a full year? And will he, even if Michael Malone does commit to it, will he look good enough by March that you're like, yes, in the playoffs, Peyton Watson attacking and pick and roll is one of the things we have up our sleeve? I don't know about that. It's one of the most interesting questions I think about next year, because that's not a lot of runway for him to get that far. But I think he has it in him.
Really quick, like 30 seconds. This question from Steve Wynn. Will Vlatko have any impact next year?
So he was on my list actually of guys that will be better next year. Now, by virtue that he did not play this year, but I honestly just think if you said, okay, if you replace the 500 Zeke Najee minutes with Vlatko this year, I actually think they would be better, in large part because I just think Zeke had such a challenging year. And I think Vlatko is better built for a challenging year. Like he's better built for none of this is for you, but go out and fit in. By the way, just real quick to run through it, Strother, the only other two players on my list, Strother, who, by the way, I'm not convinced he has a better year, maybe, but if he does play and if he's playing, it means he was good enough to have a better year. And then Hunter, I put Hunter/Jalen. One of those guys I think is playing next year. Maybe it's 0, but I think one of them probably gets some minutes to go out and do something, which is greater than 0 minutes. Therefore, they will be better.
Okay, on the other side, we'll talk about who's going to be worse next season. Who do we think is going to be worse next season? This should be a fun experiment. We'll do that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which make it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. This is so true. When you're trying to manage a small business, I've done it before. You're trying to manage so many small fires that are going on and then trying to push the business forward. You need to be able to find these answers and really fill those positions quickly and not have to stress too much about it because it's just one more thing on your plate. LinkedIn's constantly finding ways to make that process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Monday. World's finest with you. All right, Adam, we did the positive stuff. Let's talk about the negative. Who do you think is going to be a little bit worse next season for the Nuggets?
Well, let's just start with KCP. Yeah. Either he's back and will probably be worse because he played a lot of minutes and he's on the other side of that peak, So I think he will be worse, or he'll just not be here, which would be worse. So I think one of those two things is true. But even if he's back, I think KCP is in line for fewer games. And maybe even just like as a regular season player, a guy you probably shouldn't rely on to do as much as he had to do this year.
Yeah.
Defensively.
He was so good defensively. Like he was so good for long stretches of the year, but he is kind of getting up there in terms of the mileage.
That's part of it. He was phenomenal this year. So to think he'll be worse, I still think he'll be great.
Right.
If he's back.
Yeah. The floor is pretty high. I don't think Nikola is going to be worse. I think he'll just be like the same. He might be a little bit better if the touch around the rim, right? Because like he missed some bunnies this year, and the three wasn't kind of there. And you and I think are in the same kind of place on the mileage standpoint of like the minutes are starting to catch up with him a little bit. But I still feel like on the nights when Nikola is good, I still feel like he's going to be as good as he ever was, and he'll be great so often. I'm not sure that we're going to like, I think it's very possible that I look back in particular and say, no, I think this was better than last year, despite him winning MVP. Like, I think there's a very strong possibility of him having a better season next year. And I don't even know necessarily if that means that he will be a better player. It might just be the results are better. Does that make sense? Because I think that he is so maximized at this point with how great he is at everything.
I think he has a worse year next year, and it's not meaningfully worse. I think it's still in line with what we expect of him. I think they'll probably ask a little bit less of him. He's going to be playing most likely in the Olympics this summer. He already was fatigued, this last season. He's put a lot of mileage up, and I just think this is the year where you turn Denver, if they're doing things right, probably should position themselves to rely on him a little bit less. If you look at his effective field goal percentage, I think it's 6 straight years of improving until this year, where it was worse than the previous season. So we already have a 1-year sample size where he was less efficient as a scorer for the first time. since I think his second or third year. So now I look at that and I go, I would not be surprised if next year Yoke averages somewhere around 25 points, maybe 25 and a half, which is a point less per game. If his assists were probably around 8.5, a half assist down, and if his field goal percentage or his efficiency is more in line with what we saw this year as opposed to his absolute apex years 2-3 years ago.
AG is actually maybe the starter I'm most worried about.
I think he's number one of the meaningful guy outside of KCP to me.
Yeah, so I just think that Aaron's had a lot of mileage on him physically. We didn't talk about it on the show, but Aaron's also just suffered a lot of tragedy this summer with his brother dying. And that's, I'm not going to say it's going to affect his game because that's a year from now and there's all these type of things, but it's just like one more thing that's on his plate to handle. And
it's heavy.
He's tasked with like a lot on this team. I think that's one of the things is Aaron is simultaneously a guy that like the box score doesn't jump off the page. He isn't asked to do a whole lot. Like he doesn't need to score 20 a night. He doesn't need to grab 15 rebounds. He doesn't have to dish out 9 dimes. He doesn't have to set the offense, right? But he is a connector in so many ways, in so many different lineups. And he oftentimes has to play up and down from his position. He's guarding 2 guards and he's guarding power forwards and he's guarding centers. And like, he has to jump around so much. And he has taken a beating in that. Like Aaron really was banged up the whole year. And I just kind of think that's probably going to take a toll on him. And I wonder if that's going to impact maybe how we look at his season next year.
It would be hard to imagine him being as good. Same with Yoke, same with KCP. These are all guys that are now at that age 29, 30, port of their career, which is where you've got to start thinking about managing your body. So I would expect him to have the same quality and caliber of player, but a lesser season. And come playoff time, if you do everything right, then you should have the regular AG, maybe even a better AG than ever come playoff time if you do things right, because he is smarter. And I don't think his athleticism is like meaningfully less than what it was, say, last year, 2 years ago, whatever. It's around the same level. But as a regular season player, I do think that you have to spell him a little bit, probably play him at center less, and just be careful and be cautious with how you use him this year.
As a fair critic of him, I would like for you, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on Jamal. I am kind of like, he'll be the same dude. Like, he's just going to be the same guy. Like,
yeah,
don't expect I'm not expecting a jump in it. Like he did get better as a playmaker this season.
Yeah.
But I'm not expecting a jump in 3-point volume. I'm not expecting a jump in scoring. I'm not expecting a jump in prestige. I'm not expecting him to have an incredible season. It's contract year. So maybe that like,
but he's going to have a contract by the time it begins. This is the scary part. This was the contract year. He could have got a supermax extension. Like, there was a lot at stake for a guy to be like, he's going to have his greatest season ever this year. And it didn't happen. So there's that. I would say I don't expect him to be worse. I expect him to be the exact same. It's funny. He averaged 21.2 points per game. Back in 2021, he averaged 21.2 points per game. He averaged 4 rebounds, then 4.1 now. So like his numbers are pretty flat. Here's what I'll say. We've been debating this, the DNVR guys. I think Jamal Murray is going to go back to having the same season that we expect, which is 21 points per game, maybe 22, maybe it bumps up. And then in the playoffs, he's his best self. But I don't expect him to be meaningfully different in any way.
Not predicting an all-star year for Jamal Murray.
I do not think he'll be an all-star. And I don't think he's going to come back and we're going to look at, training camp and be like, my God, look at that. The man is ripped.
Yeah. One more. 1, do you expect Zeke Naji to be on the roster? And 2, if he is, what are you expecting from him?
Real quick note from Jake Coyne that says that Jamal can get extended during the season, by the way. And maybe that's how this whole thing plays out is, hey, we'll get it to you when you earn it. Maybe
by the way, if any of you aren't following Jake, you need to.
It's that Squatch on Twitter.
That Squatch.
Zeke Naji, I just don't think will be on the team. And if he is, I can't imagine. Like, I don't think Michael Malone instilled confidence in guys like Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, and what have you. I think next year it's going to be on his mind to really, I think it's going to be important for him to do it. And I think he's going to do it. If you say he's going to do that to Zeke Naji, like, that's asking too much, man. It's asking a lot of Michael Malone to say, hey, live with the mistakes of Christian Brown and Peyton Watson. But to say that of Zeke Naji, who's been around the team for long enough, that would be too much. He's not going to be on the team, though.
Kind of levy some criticism here.
Yeah.
Because I haven't done it as much. I'm as always, I'm defensive of Malone. I think that he overreacted to that Mavericks game.
The Spurs game?
No, the Mavericks game.
Who did?
Malone. So Zeke was in when I think it was Gafford got like 4 offensive rebounds in a row.
Oh, okay.
And that was like the moment when Zeke went from like part of the second unit and then like never seen again. And I genuinely think that the biggest reason I think that was a mistake is that, and I think the playoffs really did show this, and I am kind of taking that lesson from these finals. Usually I'm used to this paradigm. You cut down a number of guys. You can't play all these guys. Come on. Like you're down to 7 guys by the time that you're in the finals. Jason Kidd's gone the opposite way where he's like, no, I need to play Dante Exum more. Like I got to get to Dante Exum and Jaden Hardy. I got to find these other dudes. And the Celtics are still kind of like, hey, like we're going to pull Xavier Tillman out and we're going to use him. And like Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard are still going to be in the rotation. We're not going down to 6 or 7. So like we're going to keep using him. And I think having Zeke as an option would have been helpful in that series. You can be like, you can't play Zeke in that series. Like, come on. I think you have to be able to think outside the box and not close yourself off. And that's one of the problems with running a short rotation is you don't have options then. Then it's just like, you just got to make it work with these 7 guys. And once you run out of options, you also run out of potential solves, which was such a strength for them. So something to kind of consider.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out. I would be shocked if Zeke was on the roster. I think that it expires with people, and we all kind of know when that is, and it's clearly expired for Zeke, in my opinion.
So speaking of the finals, the Western Conference is an absolute gauntlet, and it will only be better next year, most likely. We'll talk about exactly how tough it's going to be and what we expect from the Western Conference next season. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. It's the #1 fantasy sports app, like I said. When the finals are over, the hoop action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is just getting started with young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. That was a great game today, by the way, between the Fever and the Sky. Caitlin Clark with a clutch block late. Fever have now won 4 of 6, so turn their season around pretty quickly. You can make your first deposit and you can get an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skills, you can play for a shot, turning your $10 into $1,000. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's just download the app and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. If it sounds like my speech is slurred, I bit my tongue really hard at dinner. And so I'm like trying to navigate these reads and these words. So let's talk about the Western Conference, man, because it is kind of funny that everyone's like, oh man, the West, look at the West. The East is such trash. The West. And then we get to the finals and it's like the 5 seed versus the Celtics. But
I mean, the 5 seed making it shows that the West was deep, that the 5 seed was capable of it. I don't think that proves anything. Boston is just a really good team. They had won 64 games.
So I think there are a couple of interesting questions here. I think a good starting point is how many wins do you think it's going to take to win the #1 seed in the Western Conference next year?
Ooh, I am of the opinion that I don't think teams are winning 60 in the West, although maybe not. You know what? I'm gonna say I think there's a team that wins it the regular season in the West next year, and I think they actually do get to 61 wins.
Whew.
But I think that's a little bit of an outlier.
It's a lot of wins. I'll say 55. Nice.
3 teams made 57 this year.
Yeah, and I think we're going to continue to see.
Actually, you know what? I think you're right. I'm going to go 59 on my top end. I think they're the outlier, but they might be so far ahead that they don't push. That's what I get.
Here's the counter argument. it was this way with 3 teams over 57 in a year in which the draft, no one had any incentive to tank. And next year is the Cooper Flag draft.
Okay.
So teams are going to be absolutely just like climbing. If you are bad in December, you should just be like, nope. All right. Going for Cooper, like going for flagging for Flag. He is projected to be that kind of a prospect. Not a Wemby, but really, really good. So, but I just kind of think that we'll continue to kind of see him move a little bit more towards competitiveness. And especially, I thought a lot about this. In the last 2 seasons, we have seen 2 8 seed make the conference finals and 1 make the finals, a 5th seed make the finals, and a 6th seed make the conference finals. So the problem now is like there used to be kind of this time when teams really would be like, look, we just don't have it. Like we just don't have it. And what's weird is it felt like the Cavaliers were like that this year, where the Cavaliers were just like, yeah, we just don't have it. And I was like, you could have had the 3 seed. What are you doing? Like, you're really good. You've Donovan Mitchell. But I think we're going to see less of that. And that's one of the reasons why I think we'll continue to see this kind of parity. I guess here's a question. How many of the Western Conference playoff teams, the 8 Western Conference playoff teams, how many of them do you expect to miss the playoffs next season?
Man, that's a great question. So if you just go through it, Oklahoma City is the team that I think wins the West next year. They're young. They have the assets to be better next year. Like they used this year to figure out who they are and what they need. And I just think they're going to be better next year. So they did have a lot of health though this year, but I think they're the 1 seed. I think Minnesota, this was their year to be as good. You know, next year they might be better in the playoffs, but I don't know if they're going to have a better regular season. I don't see the Clippers having a different year than they had this year. I don't really see Dallas maybe being a little bit better for some confidence of this run. I don't know. Phoenix, who knows? New Orleans is the team that I think they're going to make a big trade. And I think it's a coin flip to see if they're better or worse, to be honest with you. Like they could be a lot better. They should be. But every time you say that, they're worse than you expect.
Yeah, so I'll say what I'm expecting from the Pels now. 3 weeks ago, before Trajan Landon took the Pistons job, I thought they were going to make major moves. And since then, it's been a lot of like, yeah, they might not necessarily get, maybe some patience there.
No way, man. If there is, you need to get rid of Griffin right away. If they bring back Brandon Ingram, if they bring him back, I'm sorry. Griff should be out.
We'll see what happens. But right now, if you had told me to put odds on it, like CJ McCollum is way more likely to move than Brandon Ingram.
That's insane to me. That's absolutely insane.
Would have to be like a small, it would still be a small plus number, but it'd be a plus number for him to get traded.
That's insane to me. Absolutely insane. I think he gets traded.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
And I'll tell you there's 2 teams that I think there's 3 teams in the West that I think make big moves. New Orleans, Houston, and Sacramento. Yep. I think those 3 teams all take a swing. And I honestly think 2 out of 3 of them are better and 1 out of 3 of them is worse. Like they're in the type of position where it's not for certain, like Sacramento in particular, it's not for certain that they're going to make the move. And it's like, that worked. It might make a move. And it's like, man, we would do something. And that one didn't. This
is speculative. It's not based on reporting, but more than one person that actually is like works in the league has suggested to me Jimmy Butler to Houston. That's been a mention.
They would be good, man. I think they would. I mean, it's volatile. You never know how pieces fit and everything, but talent-wise, it would make sense.
Everything is kind of like Houston is big game fishing only, where they're not going to they're not trading any of the young guys unless they get that level of player. Like you have to get that level of guy.
Yeah.
The Kings, on the other hand, are much more aggressive, where they're going to offer Malik Monk the most that they can, but they can only offer him $71 million, and he's walking. Like he's going to get way more money from Detroit, Charlotte, or Orlando.
Okay.
And so they've it's really funny. They are offering the exact same thing they offered the Raptors twice for OG Anunoby and then Pascal Siakam, which is Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, and picks is the trade package that they are peddling around right now. But yeah, I think they're going to make substantial moves. We'll have one team that probably misses with injury, right?
It always happens. Well, I'll give you 3 wildcard teams, though, because I think there's 3 wildcard teams, and I'm curious what you think is going to happen with them. Golden State, of course, like who knows?
Yeah.
Memphis, which, has had this weird year and a half. And then San Antonio is the other one. Like, there were rumors earlier on in the year that maybe San Antonio was going to go all in and get a star and then try to just be ready now. I don't know if they do that, but Memphis, Golden State, San Antonio, I just feel like one, maybe two of those teams ends up being, really good next year.
I think Memphis will be good. I thought Memphis would be good this year, so I kind of have blown my credibility on that point, whatever small amount of credibility I had.
Why did you think they would be good this year? I mean, part of it was Ja got hurt even when he came back. But
I will kind of always die on this hill that if Steven Adams hadn't gotten hurt the week of the season, that they would have been okay, because everything fell apart when they didn't have anybody to run, like no center to run pinch post through, no center to put next to Jaren. Like everything fell apart. Everyone got hurt in that team. They had the most starting lineups of any team in NBA history. Like, yeah, just a cursed year. So I was like, they'll just like get through the first 25 and then like Ja will be there. And a lot of it's just like, I expected Desmond Bane to have a monster year. And guess what? He did. Like, he made this huge leap and it didn't really feel like it because they just got stomped on every night. So we'll see kind of what happens. I will tell you, I am very worried about the fact that they are actively looking to move up and potentially take a center in the top of this draft. That terrifies me as a Memphis guy. Like, I am terrified of that. I'm like, let's not put a rookie center.
Golden State's the crazy one though, because I think I have a hard time figuring out how they wiggle out of this, but they do have Steph Curry. And if you have Steph Curry, you don't have to build that good of a team to at least have your name in there.
Yeah. So like if they're able to get under, but the biggest problem is like, they're trying to get out of the repeater. Like that's tough, man. And so I'll be very curious to see. I think there's kind of an assumption that Clay's gone. Maybe that changes, but there's kind of an assumption that Clay's gone. How do you replace him? Are you able to get, even if they just reduce the luxury tax, would they still stay as a tax team? Do they use the taxpayer MLE to add somebody that were like, oh, that was a really good signing. Like, that was just like a really smart signing. One of those like glue guys. But is that enough if it's just Steph and Draymond? If they don't have another guy, does Kuminga make a leap? Does Moses Moody make a leap? Like, I think they're really tough to kind of figure out. I think they're extremely difficult to kind of figure out. And Sacramento, I think, is largely, to me, in that same boat where they've been good. They overachieved in 2023. I don't know that they underachieved in 2024, but I think they were kind of like where they should be in 2024. And I just don't know how they get better. Like, that to me is like the really big question.
Yeah.
If they had, they have to. I think the biggest problem is that the Kings have to gamble a little bit. I do have a hot take for you.
Let me hear it.
I think it is, if I could get a bet at good odds for the Spurs to make the playoffs and the Suns to miss at the same time,
you could probably get great odds on that if you could put them together.
And I would take it. So
I was going to ask you, because we didn't talk about Portland. We didn't talk about Utah. We can save those. If you want to talk about them, we can. But the two teams we didn't talk about besides them is Phoenix and the Lakers. And like, look, I hate doing this because I think that both of them are just who they are, and they're going to be that again next year.
Yeah.
But if one of them were, again, we're before free agency. If one of them were to become good next year, like to reach this theoretical potential that they're supposed to have, which one would you say it is?
The Lakers.
LeBron's my age, man. It's like we keep talking about how old LeBron is, but this is his actual age 40 season. Like,
so Mike Scotto reported this, and I'd heard the same, that Donovan Mitchell is going to sign a 3-year deal with a player option as fourth, because you get to the 10 years of service then and could hit free agency again. But let's say that that's a feint and Mitchell doesn't resign and tells them instead, hey, really enjoyed my time here, but I'm not going to resign. You guys should probably look to get what you can for me. And then he winds up in LA, and you got Donovan Mitchell as a replacement there with LeBron signing whatever that he does with bird rights. And it's Donovan Mitchell and Anthony Davis with LeBron James as like the third guy.
I never know how this stuff works, man. Like, this idea that they had a third max contract guy. I mean, maybe, I guess.
And so that to me is like, or if it's Jimmy, right? It's like however it gets there, if they do that, because they've just done it so many times, it does. Now, if it's Jimmy, I actually am just kind of like, man, I don't know. Like, that's 3 guys, 33 and above with not good injury histories outside of LeBron. Like, that's just not, you're not going to be able to keep him whole the season as much as you need to. With Phoenix, I'm just kind of like, it very much seems like Ishbia is like, nope, like, these are our guys. Like, we're building around these guys. These guys are on the marquee. And I'm like, you have no way to build a team unless you move one of these dudes. You can't build you got to build a team. You need like an identity and a culture and like a whole roster. And like, maybe that stuff fits together next year with Bud, but I just don't see how they're going to be able to construct a one. Like, you look at the Celtics and how good, and they're an exception, right? Because they're so good, but like 1 through 7 is so good. Even with Peyton Pritchard, like, they're so good. And then you look at the Suns, and it's like Grayson Allen's the 4th best player. Yusuf Nurkic is the 5th best player.
For sure. Yeah. I wouldn't say the Celtics 7 deep. I think the Celtics have a tremendous starting 5, and Al Horford is like a super vet, guy. I think Peyton Pritchard to me is kind of a regular. He's good, but he's kind of a regular 7th guy to me. Sam Hauser, they're like very flawed players, but their top 6 is so good that it's okay. You cover for them with all the other guys that you have.
Yeah.
I don't know. Phoenix, I think, is who they are. You bring in Bud. It's not exactly a coach I would have predicted would be great there, but they have the talent. It's the same story with them as always. They have the talent. I just don't think anything will come of it.
They got to make it work. All right. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you tomorrow with Swipa, and then Adam and I'll be back for World's Finest on Wednesday, and we'll keep you rolling all through the week. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to hit that like button on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Helps us out so much, guys. Let us know who you think is going to be the surprise team in the Western Conference next year in the comments. We'll take a look at those and talk about them on the next show. For Adam Mares, I'm Matt Moore. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.